What if Naruto traveled to Hunter x Hunter universe? Chapter 1. Strange Universe. The ambient energy of the forest didn't feel right. It was wilder, disjointed, and lacked the familiar, interconnected resonance of the elemental nations. Naruto Uzumaki groaned, rubbing his head as he sat up. He expected to feel the lingering ache of the Sage of Six Paths power, or perhaps the sheer, bone-deep exhaustion that came from sealing away Kagaya Otsutsuki alongside Sasuke. Instead, his clothes felt absurdly baggy. The collar of his orange jacket sat loosely around his neck, and his sleeves swallowed his hands entirely. He looked down at his palms. They were tiny, unblemished by the heavy calluses of his teenage training. A quick inspection of his reflection in a nearby puddle confirmed the devastating truth. He had been shrunk back into a 12-year-old kid. Kurama? Naruto called out internally, a sudden spike of panic tightening his chest. Kurama, you there? Calm down, brat, a rumbling, deeply resonant voice echoed in his mind. The massive nine-tailed fox shifted within the cage of Naruto's subconscious, though the bars were now unsealed. I'm here, and don't panic about your size. Our chakra networks are perfectly intact. In fact, because your physical body shrank, the density of our energy is incredibly compressed. You still have everything, your Rasengans, the truth-seeking orbs if you call them, your father's flying Raijin formulas embedded in your memory, and your mother's sealing chains. Even that ridiculous cellular healing from the old sage is running laps in your blood. Naruto let out a massive sigh of relief, his shoulders dropping. Great, but where the hell are we? This doesn't feel like the land of fire. It's not, Kurama grunted, narrowing his crimson eyes. The energy in the air here, it's different. It's not chakra, it's raw, unrefined life force flowing through the environment, but nobody is actively molding it. Stay on your guard. Following a faint, distant trail of hundreds of human presences, Naruto wandered away from the strange woods and found himself descending a massive stone staircase. It led into a damp, colossal underground tunnel packed with hundreds of intensely quiet, tense people. Everyone wore a circular badge with a number on it. Naruto noticed a blank badge sitting on a crate near the entrance and, figuring it was some kind of entry pass, slapped it onto his chest. It read number 405. Before he could fully process the strange, colorful, and heavily armed crowd, a short, stocky man with a large nose and a deceptive, grandfatherly smile walked up to him. He was holding a few silver cans of juice. Kid, you look a little lost, the man said, his voice dripping with faux concern. I'm Tonpa. It's tough being a rookie here. The tension in this tunnel can really get to you. Have a drink to take the edge off. Naruto took the can, offering a polite nod. Oh, thanks, mister. But the moment his fingers wrapped around the cold metal, Naruto's six paths sensory abilities flared. Even without entering Sage mode, his heightened awareness allowed him to sense the malicious intent radiating off Tonpa. Beneath the sweet scent of the juice, Naruto could practically see the chemical compound of a brutal, fast-acting laxative swirling inside the liquid. Tonpa watched with a hidden, wicked smirk, waiting for the kid to collapse in agony. Instead, Naruto popped the tab and chugged the entire can in one go. Deep within his gut, a tiny flicker of Kurama's scorching chakra ignited, instantly vaporizing the poison and turning it into harmless steam before it could even hit his stomach lining. Naruto lowered the can, smacked his lips, and blinked in mild disappointment. Man, that tasted like battery acid mixed with old dishwater, Naruto said, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. You got any ramen instead? Or maybe some green tea? Tonpa's jaw dropped, his face drained of color, and his knees actually buckled slightly as he stumbled backward. What the hell? Tonpa's mind screamed. That dose was enough to put a full-grown grizzly bear in the hospital for a week. Who is this kid? Wow, you didn't even blink. Your stomach must be made of iron. Naruto turned to see a boy his own age with spiky black hair tipped with green, wearing a simple green jacket and carrying a fishing rod over his shoulder. Standing right beside him was a tall, lanky man in a blue suit wearing tiny sunglasses, a blonde youth with an ethereal, calm demeanor wearing a traditional kurta tabard, and a boy with pale silver hair who was casually riding a skateboard. I'm gone, the spiky-haired boy said, grinning widely and extending a hand. This is Leorio, Kurapika, and Kahlua. We saw that guy give you the drink. He gave us some too, but Tonpa-san said it might have been expired. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage. Believe it, Naruto grinned back, his thumb pointing proudly at his chest. He instinctively fell into his old, loud introduction before remembering that absolutely nobody here would have a clue what a Hokage was. Hokage? Leorio raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses and looking Naruto up and down. Is that some kind of specialized, high-ranking hunter? Never heard of it. Something like that. It means I'm gonna be the boss of my whole village, Naruto laughed, scratching the back of his head to cover his track. Kahlua flipped his skateboard up into his hand, catching it flawlessly. His sharp, sapphire eyes narrowed as he scanned Naruto's relaxed posture. Unlike Gon, Kahlua had been trained from birth to spot killers, poisons, and anomalies. The kid's heart rate didn't even skip a beat, Kahlua thought, a cold curiosity washing over him. And his presence, it feels weird. He looks wide open, but my instincts are telling me that jumping him would be like jumping a brick wall. Hey, Kahlua spoke up, his voice cool and detached. You just drank enough laxatives to empty a rhino's intestines. How are you standing? Oh, that? Naruto waved a dismissive hand. I've got a really stubborn stomach. My mom used to say I could digest rocks if I wanted to. Before Kahlua could press further and demand a real answer, loud, shrill, mechanical ringing echoed through the damp cavern. The chatter of the hundreds of applicants instantly died down. At the very front of the tunnel, a tall, strangely proportioned man with no visible mouth and a sharply curled purple mustache stood perfectly straight. He wore a fine suit and held a small cane. I apologize for the delay, the man announced, his voice carrying clearly across the stone walls despite his lack of a mouth. The registration period for the hunter exam is now officially closed. I am Satats, your examiner for the first phase. You must follow me to the second phase. That is the entirety of the test. Follow you? Leorio muttered. That's it? Just a walk? Please be warned, Satats continued, turning his back to the crowd. The path ahead is arduous. If you lack the physical or mental fortitude, I suggest you turn back now. For those staying, follow me. Satats began to move. His walk was bizarre. His legs moved in long, rhythmic, mechanical strides that seemed to defy natural human biomechanics. Within seconds, his casual walk accelerated into a swift, sweeping glide. The front of the crowd immediately scrambled to keep up, and within minutes, the entire mass of hundreds of applicants transitioned from a casual walk to a brisk jog, and finally to a full, grueling sprint. The stone tunnel seemed to stretch on into absolute infinity, lit only by dim, flickering torches along the walls. Hey, this is kind of fun. Gon laughed, his legs pumping easily as he kept pace with Naruto and Kahlua. Are you crazy? Leorio yelled from a few paces behind, already sweating through his white dress shirt. We don't even know how long this damn tunnel is. It could go on for miles. Naruto ran alongside them, completely effortless. His small body felt weightless. After spending years carrying giant scrolls, training on top of spikes in Sage mode, and fighting literal gods, running in a straight line on flat ground felt like a vacation. He wasn't even breathing hard. He glanced back at Leorio, whose face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. The tall man's breathing was ragged, his suit jacket was thrown over his shoulder, and his leather shoes were slapping violently against the damp stone. Hey, suit guy, Naruto said, seamlessly slowing his pace to match Leorio's frantic, heavy strides. You're wasting way too much energy shouting. Breathe through your nose, keep your rhythm steady. Easy, for you to say, you little monster. Leorio wheezed, clutching a stitch in his side. You kids aren't even sweating. Kurapika ran a few feet away, his expression grim but composed. Leorio, save your breath. If you collapse here, you fail. The examiner has no intention of slowing down. Leorio stumbled, his boot catching on a slick patch of moss. He nearly went down, his eyes widening in panic as the crowd began to swarm past him. Naruto didn't think twice. He reached out, his small hand catching Leorio by the forearm to steady him. But Naruto didn't just pull him up. Deep within his core, Naruto tapped into a microscopic, fraction of a percent drop of the Sage of Six Paths physical energy. The pure, life-giving yang release that had once saved Might Guy from the brink of ash. He let that golden, warm vitality flow out of his hand and into Leorio's damp sleeve. To the naked eye, nothing happened. There was no giant explosion of light, no glowing aura. But to anyone paying close attention, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of pure warmth rippled through the air between them. Instantly, the tearing, burning fatigue in Leorio's lungs vanished. The micro-tears in his overexerted leg muscles repaired themselves at a cellular level in less than a millisecond. His racing heart stabilized into a calm, powerful rhythm, and the heavy fog of exhaustion lifting from his brain felt like a bucket of ice water on a hot summer day. Leorio gasped loudly, taking a massive, clean breath of air as his strength flooded back into his limbs. He stood completely upright, blinking in absolute shock. What just happened? Leorio stared at his own hands, opening and closing his fists. I feel amazing. I feel like I just slept for 8 hours and ate a giant steak. The pain in my legs is completely gone. Kurapika's sharp eyes narrowed to tiny slits. He had been watching closely. He had seen the way Naruto touched Leorio, and he had felt, even without knowing what it was, a sudden, overwhelming pressure of life radiate from the blonde boy. It wasn't physical strength, it was something deeper, something that felt ancient and blindingly pure. Who is this boy? Kurapika thought, his mind racing. That wasn't martial arts. He healed Leorio's exhaustion in a single second. Killua, too, had stopped his skateboard for a brief second to watch the interaction before kicking off again. His assassin training drilled into him the ability to perceive physical conditions. Leorio had been on the verge of physical collapse. His muscles were failing. Now, the man was running like he had just started the race. Killua pulled his skateboard right up next to Naruto, his eyes fixed on the ninja's whisker-marked face. "Hey, Naruto," Killua said, his voice dropping into a low, deadly serious tone. "How did you do that? What did you do to Leorio?" Naruto laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, that? Just a little trick I picked up from my dad's old notes and a really stubborn old friend. It's all about managing your internal energy, ya know?" "That wasn't just managing energy," Killua muttered, his eyes narrowing further as he glided forward on his board. "You're weird, Naruto, and your dad must have been some kind of freakish doctor." "Nah, he was just a really awesome leader," Naruto said, his smile softening for a brief second with a touch of bittersweet pride. "He's not around anymore, neither is my mom, but they left me a ton of cool stuff to learn, so I gotta make him proud." Gon looked over, his eyes wide with a sudden, deep sense of shared understanding. "Your parents are gone too? My mythic hunter dad left me with my Aunt Mito, and I'm taking this exam to find out why being a hunter was so important to him." "Yeah? Then let's both pass this thing and show 'em what we've got." Naruto grinned, his bright energy instantly returning as he looked ahead into the dark, seemingly endless tunnel where Satatsu's rhythmic footsteps echoed. "Come on, let's pick up the pace. We don't want to lose the guy with no mouth." With a burst of laughter, Gon accelerated, and Naruto happily kept pace right beside him, leaving a deeply bewildered Kurapika and a newly revitalized Leorio to marvel at the strange, boisterous boy who had just turned the grueling exam into a playground. As the hours ticked away inside the claustrophobic stone tunnel, the environment began to change. The air grew thicker, heavy with moisture and a distinct, earthy smell of rot and damp vegetation. Up ahead, a faint, gray light began to pierce the darkness. "We're finally reaching the exit," Gon yelled, pointing toward the light. The applicants burst out of the tunnel, blinking rapidly against the sudden change in scenery. Instead of open country or a city, they were greeted by a sprawling, murky swamp shrouded in a dense, swirling fog. Twisted, gnarled trees emerged from the murky waters like skeletal hands, and the croaks and screeches of unknown creatures echoed through the mist. Satats stepped onto the damp grass, turning around to face the remaining, heavily panting crowd. This is the Numere wetlands, also known as Swindler's Swamp, Satats announced, his voice smooth and clear. Many of the creatures residing here will use deception to prey upon you. If you lose sight of me in the fog, you will surely perish. Please remain close. Before Satats could even turn back around, a loud shout cut through the crowd. Don't let him fool you. A battered, bleeding man stumbled out from behind a massive rock near the tunnel exit. He was dragging a bizarre, ape-like creature with a face that perfectly mirrored Satats's mustache and expression. He's an imposter, the wounded man cried out, pointing a trembling finger at the examiner. I am the real examiner. That thing is a man-faced ape, a creature from the wetlands that lures applicants deep into the swamp to eat them. The crowd instantly erupted into frantic murmurs. Weapon hilts were gripped tighter, and eyes darted suspiciously between Satats and the newcomer. Even Leorio and Kurapika tense up, shifting into defensive stances. Wait a minute, Leorio muttered, looking back and forth. They look exactly the same. Which one is real? Naruto blinked, looking at the two Satotses. He didn't need Sage Mode for this. His basic sensory abilities, coupled with the passive, hyper-acute empathy he shared with Kurama, made the truth blindingly obvious. The guy on the ground is radiating absolute malice and hunger, Naruto thought, a bored expression crossing his face. And the mustache guy in the suit is just standing there completely calm. The fake is pathetic, Kurama scoffed in his mind. A weak transformation technique at best. Deal with it, brat. It's getting noisy. Before Naruto could step forward to expose the beast, 3 playing cards cut through the air with a terrifying, supersonic whistle. Shik, shik, shik. 2 cards buried themselves deeply into the chest and head of the wounded man on the ground, while the 3rd card was casually caught between the index and middle finger of the real Satats. The wounded man let out a horrific, inhuman screech before his body contorted, revealing the full, hairy form of the man-faced ape as it rolled over, dead. Ah, I see, a smooth, theatrical voice purred from the edge of the crowd. A tall man with pale skin, vibrant pink hair, and teardrop and star tattoos painted beneath his eyes shuffled a deck of cards with terrifying fluidity. He wore a jester-like outfit, and his golden eyes gleamed with a predatory, unsettling thrill. That settles it, Hisoka said, his eyes lingering on Satats. An examiner is a licensed hunter chosen by the committee. They would easily defend against a surprise attack like that. You are the real one. The applicants shivered, immediately backing away from the terrifying aura radiating off the magician. Naruto, however, didn't move an inch. His eyes locked onto Hisoka. His sensory perception didn't just feel Hisoka's bloodlust. It felt like a massive, suffocating wave of dark, jagged needles scraping against his skin. Whoa, Naruto thought, his eyebrows raising slightly. That guy is totally bad news. He smells worse than Orochimaru. Satats casually dropped the card he had caught. I will take that as a compliment. However, if you attack me again for any reason, I will disqualify you immediately. Is that understood? Hisoka simply bowed, a sickeningly polite smile plastered across his face. Of course. Now, we begin. Follow me closely, Satats said, turning and instantly gliding into the thick, white fog of the wetlands. The crowd scrambled into the soup-thick mist. Within seconds, visibility dropped to less than 3 feet. The ground became treacherous, shifting from slick mud to hidden, deep bogs. Screams already began to echo through the swamp as unsuspecting applicants were dragged under by camouflaged predators. Keep a close eye on Gon, Kurapika warned Leorio as they ran, their boots splashing through the mire. The visibility is terrible. Don't worry about me, Gon's voice called out from further ahead. Naruto and Killua are right here. Killua was navigating the swamp effortlessly, his eyes scanning the fog. Hey, Naruto, you're not lagging behind. Most people lose their footing in this kind of mud. Hey, I used to practice running on water and vertical tree trunks, Naruto said, his hands folded behind his head as he ran perfectly upright, his boots barely sinking into the thick mud. This stuff is nothing. Suddenly, Naruto's ears twitched. His sensory perimeter caught a massive, heavy presence shifting beneath the mud directly ahead of them. Stop! Naruto barked, his voice dropping its childish tone and carrying a sharp, commanding edge that made both Gon and Killua freeze instantly. A split second later, the ground beneath where they were about to step erupted. A colossal, armored frog-like beast with a gaping maw lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth burst from the mire, swallowing 3 unfortunate applicants running ahead of them in a single, massive gulp. The beast slammed back down, its giant, yellow eyes locking onto Gon and Killua. Whoa! Gon gasped, pulling out his fishing rod. "TCH, annoying," Killua muttered, his fingernails lengthening into razor-sharp claws as his assassin instincts kicked in. "Let me take this one," Naruto said, stepping in front of them with a confident grin. He didn't draw a kunai. He didn't mold a massive amount of chakra. He simply dropped into a low stance, his small right hand extending downward. Just a tiny bit, Kurama, Naruto thought. "Take it," the fox grinned. A micro-fraction of Naruto's wind-natured chakra swirled into the palm of his hand. To Gon and Killua, it looked like the air around Naruto's palm suddenly began to distort, a high-pitched, faint whistling sound cutting through the damp air like a swarm of angry hornets. A sphere of pure, compressed, rotating air formed, no larger than a tennis ball, but spinning with enough velocity to grind solid steel to dust. The giant swamp beast lunged at Naruto, its tongue shooting out like a whip. Naruto didn't dodge. He sprinted forward, his speed blurring so fast that Killua's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Naruto bypassed the tongue entirely, appearing directly beneath the beast's massive chin. "Rasengan!" Naruto yelled, slamming the spinning sphere upward into the monster's armored jaw. The impact didn't cause a bloody explosion. Instead, the raw, kinetic, spiraling force of the technique transferred entirely into the beast's massive body. The giant creature was lifted completely off the ground, spinning violently in the air like a top before being propelled backward through the fog, crashing heavily into a distant, gnarled tree and knocking it flat. The beast groaned, completely knocked out, its jaw unhinged. The swamp went dead silent for a moment, save for the whistling wind dying down from Naruto's palm. Gon's jaw was wide open, his eyes practically sparkling. Awesome! What kind of punch was that? Killua stood completely frozen. His mind was racing, trying to analyze what he had just witnessed. He didn't just hit it. The air was spinning in his hand. I couldn't even follow his movement at the end. Who the hell taught a 12-year-old kid to compress air into a solid weapon? Before Naruto could answer Gon, a thick, palpable pressure washed over the area from behind them. The fog seemed to part slightly, revealing a clearing just a few dozen yards away. Through the mist, the unmistakable silhouette of Hisoka emerged, surrounded by a dozen applicants who had tried to ambush him. They were already dead, their bodies strewn across the grass. Hisoka held a bloody card, his golden eyes locked dead onto the trio of kids. "Oh dear," Hisoka purred, his gaze passing over Gon, lingering on Killua, and finally stopping completely on Naruto. His smile widened into something deeply manic and twisted. "What an interesting lil sprout we have here." Hisoka took a step forward, the sheer weight of his bloodlust causing the surrounding grass to wither. Gon instinctively gripped his fishing rod tighter, while Killua dropped into a low, defensive stance, his muscles coiled like a spring. "Gon, Naruto," Killua whispered, his voice trembling slightly despite his training. "Run, now. This guy is on a completely different level." "But," Gon started. "No buts," Killua snapped. "We can't win this." Naruto didn't look back at them. He just kept his eyes on Hisoka, his arms crossed over his chest. His expression wasn't one of fear, it was a look of mild irritation. Man, guys like this really love their dramatic entrances, he thought. "Brat," Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, dripping with amusement. "You're in a different world now, but it seems crazy people are a universal constant. Want me to blast him?" "Nah," Naruto thought back. "Let's keep it low-key. If I blow up the whole swamp, we'll lose the guy with no mouth." Instead of drawing a weapon or molding his chakra into a visible aura, Naruto reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scroll he had found buried in his oversized jumpsuit. He bit his thumb, smearing a tiny droplet of blood across the paper. With a swift, practiced motion, he slammed his palm flat against the damp mud of the swamp. Summoning technique. A massive explosion of white smoke erupted in the middle of the clearing, completely obscuring the dense fog. The sudden blast of wind pushed Hisoka's pink hair back, his golden eyes widening in genuine surprise as a massive, dark silhouette materialized within the cloud. The smoke cleared to reveal a giant, bright orange toad wearing a dark blue happy coat. It wasn't Gamabunta. This toad was about the size of a small house, large enough to tower over the twisted swamp trees, but small enough to fit comfortably in the clearing. "Hey, Gamakichi!" Naruto yelled, leaping up to land flawlessly on top of the toad's head. Gamakichi blinked his massive yellow eyes, looking around at the murky swamp water and the gnarled trees. "Huh, Naruto? Man, you look tiny. And where the heck are we? This doesn't look like Mount Myoboku or the Land of Fire. I don't really know, to be honest." Naruto grinned, scratching his cheek. "Some weird world where everyone is running a marathon in a swamp. But hey, can you do me a favor? See those two kids down there?" He pointed down at Gon and Killua, who were staring up at the giant amphibian with their jaws practically hitting the mud. "Yeah, I see 'em," Gamakichi said, puffing out his throat. "Keep an eye on them for a second. This creepy makeup guy wants to pick a fight." Hisoka stood perfectly still, his bloody playing card frozen between his fingers. For the first time since the exam started, his mocking, arrogant smile faltered, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated fascination. He stared up at the giant toad, then at the 12-year-old boy casually standing on its head. "A summoning," Hisoka murmured, a dark, low chuckle escaping his throat. His aura flared, turning jagged and frantic with excitement. "Oh, how marvelous! What a truly magnificent fruit you are, Naruto-kun." Killua grabbed Gon's arm, his voice practically cracking. "Gon, tell me you see that. Tell me I'm not hallucinating a giant, talking orange frog. It's huge," Gon shouted, his eyes shining with pure awe, completely forgetting about Hisoka's threat. "Naruto, can I ride it next?" "A summoning," Hisoka murmured, a dark, low chuckle escaping his throat. His aura flared, turning jagged and frantic with pure, unadulterated excitement. He stared up at the giant toad, then at the 12-year-old boy casually standing on its head. "Oh, how marvelous! What a truly magnificent fruit you are, Naruto-kun." Killua grabbed Gon's arm, his voice practically cracking. "Gon, tell me you see that. Tell me I'm not hallucinating a giant, talking orange frog. It's huge," Gon shouted, his eyes shining with pure awe, completely forgetting about Hisoka's threat. "Naruto, can I ride it next?" "Maybe later, Gon," Naruto yelled down with a grin. Then, his face grew serious as his gaze dropped back to Hisoka. "Gamakichi, keep an eye on those two. Don't let anything sneak up on him while I deal with this clown." "You got it, Naruto," Gamakichi rumbled, shifting his massive weight. The sheer movement of his webbed feet sent ripples through the thick mud, creating a solid barrier between the two boys and the pink-haired magician. "Just don't take too long. This place smells like wet dog." Hisoka didn't wait. Intoxicated by the sudden appearance of such bizarre, overwhelming power, he lunged forward. His movement was a blur, his body cutting through the fog like a ghost as he flicked 3 razor-sharp playing cards straight toward Naruto's chest. Naruto didn't even weave a hand sign. Moving with a sharp, fluid grace that bypassed his body's childish limitations, he leaned back effortlessly, letting the cards whistle past his nose. Before Hisoka could close the distance, Naruto slipped his hand into his pouch and pulled out a standard, unmarked kunai. "Let's see how fast you really are," Naruto thought. In a fraction of a second, Naruto blurred out of sight. Hisoka's eyes widened as his target completely vanished from the top of the toad's head. There was no sound, no displaced air, and no footprint left in the mud. A split second later, Hisoka felt a cold metallic edge gently pressing against the back of his neck. "You're fast," Naruto's voice whispered calmly from right behind him, "but you leave yourself wide open when you get excited." Hisoka's breath hitched. A thrill like he had never felt before shot down his spine. Instead of panicking, he whipped his body around, sweeping his arm in a vicious arc to slice Naruto's throat with a card wrapped in his invisible, sticky aura. But his hand met empty air. Naruto had already dropped low, sweeping his leg under Hisoka's ankles. Hisoka jumped back, flipping gracefully through the air to create distance, landing lightly on a mossy log. Magnificent, Hisoka hissed, his face contorted into a mask of pure, ecstatic glee. Simply magnificent. Your speed, it isn't just physical. What kind of trick is this? Just basic training, Naruto said, twirling the kunai on his finger as he landed back beside Gon and Killua. He didn't want to use his father's true teleportation yet. This was just pure, unadulterated body flicker speed. Look, mister, we're in the middle of an exam, and I don't really have time to play with you. So how about you back off? Hisoka stared at Naruto for a long, tense moment. The killing intent radiating from him slowly began to recede, replaced by a calculating, deeply satisfied smirk. He straightened his posture, dusting off his jester outfit. Very well, Hisoka purred, turning his back to them. It would be a tragedy to break a fruit that is already so deliciously ripe. We shall play later, Naruto-kun. With a theatrical wave of his hand, Hisoka vanished back into the swirling white fog, seeking out other targets to satisfy his bloodlust. Killua slowly let go of his breath, staring at Naruto like he was looking at an alien. You just forced Hisoka to back down, without even breaking a sweat. Guys like him just need to know they can't bully everyone, Naruto laughed, turning back to the massive frog. Thanks, Gamakichi. You can head back now. Sure thing, Naruto. Don't get yourself killed in this weird place, Gamakichi said with a lazy salute. With another loud poof, the giant toad vanished in a massive cloud of white smoke, leaving the wetlands quiet once more. That was amazing. Gon cheered, jumping up and down. We gotta catch up to Satatsu-san, come on. As the trio sprinted back into the fog to find the rest of the applicants, Killua kept his eyes glued to Naruto. The mystery of the blonde boy was growing deeper by the minute, and the hunter exam had suddenly become a lot more interesting. The thick, milky fog of the Numere wetlands finally began to thin out, revealing a massive, manicured lawn bordered by a towering stone wall. In the center of the clearing stood a pair of colossal iron gates. Satatsu stood perfectly still before them, his arms crossed, waiting patiently as the scattered, muddy survivors of the first phase stumbled out of the treeline. Naruto, Gon, Killua. Naruto turned around to see Kurapika and Leorio sprinting out of the mist. Leorio was still running with an uncanny, energetic bounce in his step, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder and a broad grin on his face. Man, am I glad to see you guys, Leorio panted, though he wasn't wheezing at all. He slapped Naruto heavily on the back. I don't know what kind of magic trick you pulled back there in the tunnel, kid, but I feel like I could run another 50 miles. I even managed to carry Kurapika for a bit when the mud got too deep. Kurapika sighed, brushing some stray grass from his blue tabard, though his eyes immediately locked onto Naruto with intense curiosity. Don't exaggerate, Leorio, but he is right. We encountered that terrifying man, Hisoka, in the fog. He was carrying an applicant he claimed to be saving, but the look in his eyes, he seemed entirely distracted by something else. He muttered something about a golden sprout, and just walked right past us. Killua glanced at Naruto, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. Yeah, well, someone here gave the magician a little reality check. Wait, really? Leorio gasped, staring down at Naruto. You fought Hisoka? Nah, we just had a quick chat, Naruto lied smoothly, flashing his classic, eye-closed grin while scratching the back of his neck. He's just a little weird, that's all. Before Kurapika could question him further about what exactly a quick chat meant to a monster like Hisoka, a massive, grinding screech echoed through the courtyard. The heavy iron gates slowly began to creak backward, parting to reveal a beautiful, sunlit courtyard filled with bizarre cooking stations and various culinary tools. Sitting in the center of the courtyard on a lavish sofa was a woman with vibrant, top-knotted teal hair, wearing a revealing mesh shirt and shorts. Behind her sat a mountain of a man, easily twice the size of a normal human, his stomach rumbling loudly enough to shake the nearby fences. "Welcome to the second phase of the hunter exam," the woman announced, a mischievous glint in her eyes as she looked over the remaining applicants. "I am Menchi, and this is Buhara. We are your examiners." Leorio blinked, looking at the stovetops. "Wait a minute, cooking stations? Don't tell me." "That's right," Menchi cheered, pointing a finger at the crowd. "The second phase of the exam is cooking. And the main ingredient for today's menu is pork." A collective groan echoed through the crowd of hardened mercenaries, assassins, and martial artists. But deep within Naruto's stomach, a completely different reaction occurred. His eyes went wide, his mouth watered, and his internal sensory grid immediately began scanning the area for food. "Pork, huh?" Kurama rumbled in his mind, a massive, toothy grin spreading across the fox's face. "Sounds like the perfect excuse to make a proper chashu pork topping, brat." "Oh, man," Naruto thought, his stomach letting out a ferocious, echoing growl that made Gon laugh. "If they have noodles hidden around here somewhere, I'm turning this whole exam into an absolute feast." "Pork?" Leorio yelled, throwing his arms up in the air. "We ran through a killer swamp for hours just to play chef? Is this a joke? A hunter must possess a wide variety of skills," Leorio, Kurapika said smoothly, though even he looked slightly taken by surprise. "Discernment, tracking, and preparation are all part of survival." Menchi smirked at the complaints, crossing her arms. "The forest directly outside this courtyard is home to the world's most dangerous pig, the Great Stamp. You are to catch one, bring it back here, and cook it to our satisfaction. The round ends when we are full. Now, go." The iron gates had barely finished swinging open before the crowd turned into a stampede, rushing back out into the dense forest bordering the clearing. Naruto, Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio ran as a pack, sliding down a grassy embankment into a shallow valley filled with thick roots and massive trees. "Look, over there," Gon pointed. Emerging from the thickets was a creature that looked less like a farm animal and more like a living battering ram. The Great Stamp Pig was easily the size of a small truck, sporting a massive, heavily armored snout made of solid bone. Its yellow tusks scraped against the earth, tearing up roots and rocks as it locked its small, aggressive eyes onto the group. "Holy crap, look at the size of that thing!" Leorio shrieked, skidding to a halt. "That's not an ingredient, that's a tank." The giant pig snorted, a cloud of hot steam blowing from its nostrils, and charged straight at them. The ground shook with every step. "Scatter!" Kurapika shouted. Gon and Killua leapt onto nearby tree branches, while Kurapika and Leorio dove into the brush. Naruto, however, just slid to a stop right in the middle of the path. He didn't reach for a kunai, he didn't mold any chakra, and his hands stayed casually tucked into his pockets. "Naruto, get out of the way!" Gon yelled down from a branch. "Its snout is solid bone. You can't take it head on." Naruto didn't move, he just planted his small boots firmly into the dirt. Even without tapping into the sage's golden aura or Kurama's burning chakra, his compressed 12-year-old body held the raw, unadulterated physical density of a shinobi who had shattered meteors with his bare hands. To him, a charging pig was just a slightly heavy stray dog. The Great Stamp closed the distance in a second, lowering its massive armored head to pulverize the small boy into the earth. Just as the bone snout was inches from his face, Naruto's hands whipped out of his pockets. Moving with effortless precision, he grabbed the pig by its massive, jagged tusks. The impact caused a shockwave of wind that blew the dead leaves off the ground in a wide circle. The giant beast's legs kept churning, its hooves tearing deep trenches into the dirt as it tried to push forward, but it completely stopped dead in its tracks. Naruto didn't even slide back an inch. His small arms were locked, holding the multi-ton monster perfectly still by raw, unassisted muscle power. "Whoa, you're pretty heavy," Naruto muttered, a small grin breaking across his face. From the branches above, Killua's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He knew a thing or two about raw physical power. His own family required pushing open multi-ton testing gates just to get home. But seeing a kid his own size casually catch a charging, giant armored beast by its teeth without using a single ounce of visible effort or energy aura was completely absurd. What kind of muscles does this guy have? Killua thought, completely stunned. Alley-oop, Naruto grunted. With a sudden heave, Naruto twisted his hips and threw his arms upward. Using the pig's own forward momentum against it, he flipped the colossal beast completely over his head, slamming its spine first into the forest floor with a massive crash. The ground groaned under the impact, and the giant pig rolled over, its legs twitching in the air, completely knocked out cold by the sheer force of the throw. Naruto dusted off his hands, looking completely unbothered as he turned back to his friends. Hey, look, I got one. These guys have a really soft spot right on top of their heads behind that armor, but flipping them works too. Gon dropped down from the tree, practically vibrating with excitement. That was incredible, Naruto. You didn't even use a weapon. Yeah, well, sometimes a good old-fashioned throw gets the job done, Naruto laughed, scratching his nose. Leorio and Kurapika crawled out from the bushes, staring alternately at the massive, unconscious pig and the tiny blonde kid who had just wrestling slammed it. I've changed my mind, Leorio whispered, his voice trembling slightly as he slowly backed away from Naruto. He's definitely a monster, a cute, orange monster. An incredible display of leverage and pure physical force, Kurapika managed to say, trying to rationalize it, though his sweat-dropped expression betrayed his shock. Come on, guys. Gon cheered, pointing deeper into the valley where the rest of the herd was starting to emerge, startled by the noise. Let's get the rest of them before the other applicants find out how to beat them. With Naruto leading the pack, the group set off to secure the rest of their ingredients, completely unaware of the absolute chaos their cooking presentation was about to cause back at the exam site. The group sprinted back into the exam courtyard, each dragging a massive great stamp pig behind them. While the other applicants were sweating, swearing, and hacking away at the giant beasts with meat cleavers and hunting knives, Naruto was completely in his element. All right, Naruto cheered, tossing his pig onto his assigned cooking station. Time to make the greatest dish this exam has ever seen. Believe it, Gon leaned over from his station, tilting his head. Hey, Naruto, what are you making? Menchi-san said we just have to roast the pork, right? Roast it? Just plain old roasted pork? Naruto looked scandalized, his jaw dropping in pure horror. That's a waste of a perfectly good pig, Gon. Pork belongs in one place, and one place only. Floating on top of a piping hot, perfectly seasoned bowl of ramen. Now you're talking, brat, Kurama chimed in, practically salivating inside Naruto's mind. Don't skimp on the broth. Let the bones simmer deep. Killua, who was lazily tossing chunks of meat onto a grill, raised an eyebrow. Ramen? Naruto, we only have like an hour. Making ramen broth from scratch takes a whole day. You're gonna fail. Hey, you underestimate a ninja's cooking speed. Naruto grinned. He didn't use any flashy jutsu, but his sheer, blinding physical speed was enough to make him look like a blur. He grabbed a massive iron pot, the largest one in the courtyard, and filled it to the brim with water. With a dull thud of raw strength, he broke the pig's massive leg bones with his bare hands to expose the marrow, tossing them into the pot alongside a mountain of wild green onions and ginger he had scavenged from the swamp. While the water began to boil over a raging fire, Naruto grabbed a massive bag of flour from the ingredient station. He didn't even use a bowl. He dumped the flour straight onto the clean stone counter, splashed in water, and began kneading. Bam, bam, bam. The heavy, rhythmic slamming of the dough echoed across the courtyard, drawing bewildered stares from the other applicants. Naruto's hands moved so fast they left afterimages. He pulled, twisted, and slapped the dough against the counter over and over, using raw muscle control to stretch the gluten. Within minutes, the single lump of dough was magically transformed into hundreds of perfectly uniform, hand-pulled noodles. By the time the other applicants were presenting their charred, whole-roasted, unseasoned pigs to the examiners, Naruto was putting the finishing touches on his masterpiece. Next, Menchi yelled, slamming a failing grade stamp onto a plate of burnt pork. She was incredibly irritated. None of you have any respect for gourmet cooking. You all just slap meat on a fire. It's disgusting. Excuse me. Coming through. Hot soup. A loud voice cut through the tension. The crowd parted to see Naruto staggering forward, completely dwarfed by a colossal, steaming porcelain bowl that was easily 3 times his size. He was holding it over his head with one hand, perfectly balanced by raw physical strength, without spilling a single drop. He slammed the massive bowl down onto the examiner's table with a heavy thud. The bowl was a work of art. A vast ocean of rich, creamy tonkatsu broth swirled around a mountain of perfectly golden noodles. Arranged neatly on top were dozens of thick, tender, melt-in-your-mouth slices of chashu pork, garnished with fresh swamp greens and a perfectly soft-boiled egg he had found in a wild bird's nest. Menchi and Buhara stared up at the mountain of food, their jaws slack. What is this? Menchi stammered, her gourmet pride warring with her sheer disbelief. I said a pork dish. Not a giant swimming pool of soup. It's Ichiraku-style special pork ramen. Naruto beamed, pointing proudly at the bowl. Go ahead, take a bite. The broth is made from the bone marrow of the great stamp. Buhara didn't need to be told twice. The massive examiner grabbed a giant serving ladle, scooped up a massive portion of noodles and broth, and shoved it into his mouth. For a second, Buhara went completely rigid. His eyes went wide, and a look of pure, unadulterated ecstasy washed over his massive face. Oh my God! Buhara roared, tears literally springing from his eyes. He began shoveling the giant noodles into his mouth at a terrifying speed. The broth. It's so deep and savory. The noodles have the perfect chew. And this pork, it's so tender it's melting on my tongue. It's incredible. Hey, save some for me. Menchi snapped, pulling out a pair of chopsticks and diving into the bowl. She took a delicate sip of the broth, her eyes narrowing as she tried to find a flaw. But the moment the rich, savory flavor hit her palate, her shoulders dropped, and a blush crept onto her cheeks. This depth of flavor, Menchi thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. To extract this much umami from wild bones in less than an hour, it's physically impossible. The kneading of these noodles requires a level of strength and precision that only a master chef could possess. Who is this kid? Within less than 2 minutes, the entire, massive bowl of ramen was completely empty. Buhara let out a colossal burp that shook the courtyard leaves, rubbing his stomach with a blissful sigh. Menchi slowly put her chopsticks down, looking at Naruto with a mixture of awe and deep suspicion. She raised her paddle, flipping it to show a bright, glowing circle. Pass, Menchi announced, coughing slightly to regain her composure. Your presentation was ridiculous, and your portions are absurd, but, as a gourmet hunter, I cannot deny perfection. You pass with flying colors, Naruto Uzumaki. All right, Naruto cheered, throwing his fists in the air. From the sidelines, Leorio was staring at the empty bowl in absolute shock. Are you kidding me? He actually passed a cooking phase by making comfort food? Kahlua let out a low whistle, a smirk playing on his face. Hey, Gon, I think our new friend is a lot more dangerous than we thought. If he can do that to a kitchen, imagine what he does in a real fight. Gon just grinned, his stomach rumbling loudly. I don't know, Kahlua, but I really want a bowl of that ramen now. The celebration was cut short by a sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere. The clouds above the courtyard parted as the heavy, low hum of an engine filled the sky. A massive, luxurious blimp bearing the Hunter Association logo drifted over the stone walls. Before the applicants could even register the ship's arrival, a figure stepped completely out of the open passenger bay, plunging straight down into the courtyard from hundreds of feet in the air. Boom! The impact kicked up a massive cloud of dust, cracking the stone tiles beneath. As the smoke cleared, an elderly man stepped out of the crater. He wore a traditional, loose-fitting white nagaji, his long silver hair tied up in a topknot, and a sweeping, snow-white beard draped down his chest. He clutched a wooden geta sandal on each foot, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had just survived a terminal velocity drop. The other applicants gasped, instinctively shrinking back from the pure, suffocating presence rolling off the old man like a physical wave. Naruto went entirely rigid, his blue eyes widened to the size of saucers, his breath catching in his throat. His sensory abilities didn't just feel the old man's power, they felt a sharp, aching pang of deep nostalgia. The way the man carried himself, the deceptively frail-looking posture masking a body forged of solid iron, the mischievous glimmer behind those wise, ancient eyes, and that distinct, comforting smell of old tobacco and worn parchment. Old man Sarutobi, Naruto thought, his chest tightening as an image of the third Hokage flashed vividly through his mind. For a split second, the courtyard vanished, replaced by the warm, sunlit roof of the Hokage mansion, where an old man with a pipe would sit and smile down at a loud, lonely orphan. The structural weight of the chairman's presence was so identical to Hiruzen Sarutobi's wool of fire that Naruto's heart physically ached. "He looks like him, brat," Kurama said softly in his mind, his rumbling voice unusually gentle. "And his internal energy, it's vast. Don't let your guard down. This old-timer is a completely different beast than anyone else in this world." "Ho ho ho," Chairman Netero chuckled, stroking his long beard as his eyes scanned the courtyard, instantly locking onto Naruto. "It seems my young examiners have created quite a bit of tension here. Menchi-kun, throwing out hundreds of applicants because they don't know how to cook a pig. That seems a bit harsh, even for you." Menchi immediately bowed her head, her face flushing with respect and embarrassment. "Chairman Netero, I apologize. I let my pride get the better of me." Netero's gaze drifted down to the colossal, completely empty ramen bowl sitting on the table, and then back to Naruto. His eyes narrowed slightly, a spark of intense curiosity flashing within them. He could sense it, a deep, roaring ocean of compressed vitality coiled inside the small blonde boy, hiding beneath a layer of pure, bittersweet emotion. Well, Netero purred, stepping toward Naruto. "It seems at least one little sprout managed to capture your gourmet heart. Tell me, boy, what is your name?" Naruto swallowed the lump in his throat, wiping a stray tear from his eye before his signature, confident grin snapped back onto his face. He stood tall, looking Netero straight in the eye, seeing the ghost of his beloved mentor staring back at him. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he declared, his voice ringing loud and clear across the silent courtyard. "And I'm gonna pass this exam, old man." "Believe it," Netero blinked, and then burst into a loud, booming laugh that echoed off the stone walls. "Ho ho ho, old man, is it? It's been a long time since a child looked at me with such fierce eyes. I like you, Naruto-kun."